So this year, hi Callie, happy birthday. Matt's sad he's not here. So this year, my youngest child of 4 graduated from high school. Man, so my husband and I are going to be empty nesters. Everybody's like, how are you going to deal with that? And well, we have 4 kids, so it wasn't like we didn't see it coming, right? It's been going on for about 6 years. It's coming. We knew it was coming. So about 2 or 3 years ago, we decided it was time to find some adult playmates, right? Because everything about our life for the last 24 years has really been kind of revolved around the children, and it's time to reconnect with some adults. So we invited some friends of ours, and they were, Dave and I are both physicians, and they were the only other couple that came to medical school together, and we used to call them the old married couple. They had been married for a week before medical school, but of course they were the old married couple, and they were good friends of ours, and we had moved around a lot, and now they were in New York, and we were in Lancaster, so we invited them to come down to our house for the weekend just to kind of reconnect, because we hadn't seen them in a few years, and we were sitting down for, have a glass of wine, and my husband looks over and says, so, how's your guys' relationship? And I'm like, can we say socially awkward? Just a little bit. And I'm like, honey, really, that's that's bold, to start with that. But I knew exactly where he was coming from, right? It wasn't that long after Christmas, and we had just had this funny conversation with his parents, who are both in their late 80s, and they had moved into Woodcrest Villa. One of these pry fingers off the door jamb of his mother to leave her house and get her to Woodcrest Villa. Now she's having a fantastic time, and you can barely get to see them anymore because they're doing all this stuff. But she said the only downside to living in an old folks' home, which she won't allow us to call it, but their adult living situation, is that she said it used to, they're old, so their friends are dying, but she said it used to be kind of like you didn't really know until you didn't get a Christmas card, right? And she said now, the people live next door and they're dying, and we see it all the time. And I said, that's so funny, because our generation, the sad thing about Christmas is that in the middle of January, then January, you go, oh, we didn't get a Christmas card from them. And that usually means they got divorced, right? And so, we're making this bond, and so David is checking out the relationship to see how it goes. We had our wake-up call about relationships pretty early in our marriage. We were residents down in San Antonio. Didn't have a lot of free time, but Dave had really bonded with one of the guys that he was a resident with. He was a year ahead of him, and they were, continually lamenting all the stupid idiots in the whole world all the time, and social injustice. They both were a little bit of a hothead. And still to this day, I'll be like, hon, I'm not feeling it. Maybe you should call Rob. I'm sure he'd be incensed, but I'm not feeling it. But we had a really comfortable friendship with them. It was, she was a physician as well, though she wasn't in the hospital with us, so I only saw her on Friday nights when they would come to our house, or we'd go to their house, we'd make dinner together, we'd watch X-Files. Is anybody here old enough to have watched X-Files? But yeah, see, it was so fun. And then Rob announced one time that he decided he wanted to run a marathon. And so David and Rob started training for a marathon. And so we had another dimension to our relationship. We were going to go to San Francisco. They picked a cool place to have a marathon. And then Dave came back from a long run and said, they're seeing a marriage counselor. And we're just like, oh my God. Totally didn't see that coming. And so, Dave was spending a lot of time with Rob because they were running for a marathon. I'm saying, I gotta spend some more time with Susan. We're gonna wrap ourselves around them. We're gonna help them through this. And I sat down with Susan, and she told me a story about how Rob had yelled at her the very first week they were married 7 years ago. And I just got sick to my stomach, because I was like, that was a long time ago, and Rob yells a lot. And so I figured this was going to the way every coffee that we had was going to go for quite some time. And, we went to the marathon, Rob with his male and female traveling companion, because they had separated. And, we held Rob when, they got divorced. And luckily, also got to go to his wedding of his second wife, who yells right the fuck back at him. Good for her. And they are still married, and they are doing well. But that was really a wake-up call for us about relationships. It was about that time, so we have this little private joke now, about this time after Susan told me that, she'd kept all this inside for that long. I went home, and I'm like, why don't you make me coffee in the morning? And he said, what? And I was like, he was getting up an hour before I was, so he could read, and he would make a pot of coffee just big enough for him. And I would get up, and there was no coffee. And I'm like, you know what, I'm stewing on that. And I'm like, why don't you make me coffee? And he said, because it would be cold by the time you get up. And I'm like, I would drink cold coffee. And he said, okay, I'm going to make you some coffee. And I'm like, thank you. I'm really happy about that. And then one of my girlfriends called me, and she had just gotten married, and she's a surgeon, and she called me, and she's like, he's doing his laundry, and he doesn't do my laundry. Doesn't he know? And I said, no. He does not know. I said, you know, you're a little type A. I bet if you ask him, he would do your laundry. And she's like, wow, okay, they're still married too, so I think that works. So you got to not stew on things. So back to our friends. So Dave asked him, how's your relationship going? And so Robbie doesn't miss a beat. He's great. He's a pediatrician, a bilingual pediatrician in Brooklyn, and he worked for Wild Water Sports, so he always has kind of a sports metaphor. And he said, well, Beth, do you know who Walter Alston is? And I was like, no. Does anybody know who Walter Alston is? Yeah, so yeah, you're a baseball fan, right? So he was the longest running manager of the LA Dodgers. He won, Robbie told me, 7 National League titles and 4 World Series. And he said, but his thing was, he only signed 1-year contracts. He signed 23 1-year contracts. And he said, so every July 10th on our anniversary, we sign a new contract. So you'd be glad to know when I called him last night to figure out who that guy was, because I couldn't remember the name for this story, I said, and by the way, how you guys doing? Because this is a really sucky story if you've been divorced since the last time I saw you. And he goes, well, I don't know. July 10th is coming up. I think it looks pretty good. And I said, well, Story Slam's tomorrow, so don't do anything unforgivable tonight. And he said, okay, fine. Right? And he just texted me, and he said, good luck at Story Slam. We're okay.